What I'm trying to say is that there is not a definitive advantage in all cases. Sir, I don't know if you believe that you could beat Serena Williams in tennis, but I probably think that that's not the case. There are not all cases where all men are physically superior to all women. And at the end of the day, in this conversation, we're not talking about that. We're talking about trans women who are, in fact, women, who deserve to play in a gender that matches their sports, who deserve all the benefits that Ms. Gaines is talking about. And as a cisgender Black woman, I can say definitively that my womanhood is not threatened by a transgender person.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all of our witnesses here today. Ms. Robinson, I want to follow up by trying to understand your answer to one of Senator Cruz's questions. And this is really a question, not a suggestion. Do I understand your position to be that there are two sexes, but there can be more than two genders?
I wouldn't even say two, and we've got Dr. Lopez here as well, but there's also the definition of intersex. I think that often in these conversations we're conflating sex and gender, and I do want to affirm here that trans women are women. That is their gender.
Okay, but I'm trying to understand. Do you make a distinction between sex and gender?
Yes, sir.
Okay, explain that. Just do you think there are more than two sexes?
I believe that there's a definition for intersex as well that I want to acknowledge. But sex is assigned at birth.
I'm just trying to understand. I'm thoroughly confused. So you're born, I'm talking about biology, male, female, and what else?
I believe that intersex is also acknowledged. But again, I'm not a doctor here. What I can
say
is
intersex mean?
Is that there's a difference between sex and gender. And I think in these conversations, we're conflating the two.
Well, but I want to start with sex. Okay, there's male, there's female. When a baby's born, before the baby has had time to even have a sense of self, there's male, female, and intersex. There's a third sex.
I believe that is true, but I would defer to Dr. Lopez as I'm not a physician.
Okay. And how many genders are there?
I think the gender is expansive, and the definitions are always growing. Today I can tell you, I talk to young people that talk about non-binary as
more than five.
I think the gender is not a binary, is what I'm trying to say.
Are there more than five genders? I'm just trying to understand. Are there more than five genders?
Well, I think that there was a time where women wearing pants didn't feel like it was appropriate for their gender, and yet I'm wearing pants today. I think that there are ways that we express our gender that are expansive.
Are there more than five?
I wouldn't subject myself to naming how many genders there are, but what I can say is that gender is a reflection. Excuse me?
There's an infinite number of genders?
I think depending on your culture, there are a lot of different genders that exist. And I can also say that it's a term that's evolving. If you look at young people today, they really don't lean into the binary of only woman and man. So I think that it's incumbent upon us not to legislate on this, but create space for them to explore what their identities are, what their gender identities are.
Let's get back to athletics. I think I understand what you're saying. There are three sexes, male, female, and intersex.
I believe that to be true, but again, I'm not a physician.
And there are an infinite number of genders because gender is a mental state.
Gender is about expression, and I think that there are a variety of ways that you can express your gender.
Okay, so there's infinite number. All right, let's go back to the biology. Male, female, boy, girl. Okay, biologically, do males have an advantage over females biologically in sports?
Again, I'm not a physician, and I can't speak to that.
What's your real world experience?
It depends. I mean, there are some people who are born male that I'm faster than if I were to sprint against them, and some that I'm not. Some males that are taller than some women, and some that are shorter.
You don't believe that a biological male has a physical advantage in sports over a biological female?
Not as a definitive statement.
Give me an example. Well, no, I don't think. How many female members of the NBA do you see?
Well, I can say that, there's been this news article about men that think that they could beat Serena Williams in tennis, right? That they think that they could actually score a point on her. And it's just not the case. She is stronger than that.
What's your experience, Ben? Male, female?
Both Serena and Venus lost to the 203rd ranked male tennis player, which they're phenoms for women. My experience, my husband, he swam at University of Kentucky as well. In terms of accolades and in terms of national ranking, I was a much better swimmer than him. He could kick my butt any day of the week without trying.
Okay. I just think, Ms. Robinson, I'm trying to understand where you're coming from. I think you lose a lot of credibility when you don't concede that a biological male has physical advantages over a biological female. I mean, I just think that's a proven fact, and you really hurt your credibility. I understand you want the world to be a better place. I do too, and I don't think people ought to be discriminated against because of an immutable characteristic. I don't. And I think that I think everybody ought to be free to be themselves. And what you do in your bedroom or what I do in my bedroom with a consenting adult is nobody's business. But if what I do in my bedroom with a consenting adult, if I decide I want to tell somebody's child about it, then other people have rights too. And I think parents have rights. And I think biological females have rights to be able to compete fairly in sport, in sports. So I really think you hurt your credibility when you refuse to acknowledge that biological males have an advantage over biological females. It kind of makes me wonder about all your testimony. Thank you,
Senator
Mr. Chairman.
Kennedy. I'm sorry, go ahead.
What I'm trying to say is that there is not a definitive advantage in all cases. Sir, I don't know if you believe that you could beat Serena Williams in tennis, but I probably think that that's not the case. There are not all cases where all men are physically superior to all women. And at the end of the day, in this conversation, we're not talking about that. We're talking about trans women who are, in fact, women, who deserve to play in a gender that matches their sports, who deserve all the benefits that Ms. Gaines is talking about. And as a cisgender Black woman, I can say definitively that my womanhood is not threatened by a transgender person asserting hers as well.
Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank all of the persons who are testifying today. For Ms. Robinson, do you know what?
In the echoing chamber of the United States Senate, the air was heavy with questions that reached far beyond policy. What began as a simple exchange about definitions, how many genders are there, became something larger, something older, a struggle not just over words, but over who gets to decide what is real, what is human, and what America will choose to recognize as truth. Senator John Kennedy, his voice measured but unrelenting, pressed the question like a stone against glass. There are two sexes, he said, pausing for effect. But are there more than two genders? Across from him, Kelley Robinson, president of the Human Rights Campaign, met his gaze with a calm that seemed to carry centuries of struggle for identity, for dignity, for the right to exist without apology. She spoke of expansiveness, of gender as something that grows, that evolves. It's not a binary, she said. It's expansive, it's cultural, it's human. Her words floated in the tension of that room, not as defiance, but as affirmation that identity cannot be contained in the narrow boxes built by power. But Senator Kennedy pushed again. So there's an infinite number of genders? The phrase echoed through the chamber like a challenge, like a test. And perhaps, in that moment, it was. A test not only of science or semantics, but of America's moral imagination. Because beneath the surface of that question, beneath the polite formality of a Senate hearing, lies a deeper reckoning. It is not about biology alone. It is about who we allow to define the limits of humanity. It is about whether compassion can coexist with power, whether understanding can coexist with fear. For generations, America has wrestled with the idea of expansion, of rights, of definitions, of belonging. Once it was race, then religion, then gender. Now it is identity itself, fluid, complex, defiant. And here, before the watchful eyes of the nation, a senator from Louisiana and a civil rights leader met at the fault line of that change. Kennedy demanded clarity. He wanted numbers, categories, boundaries. Male, female, and what else? His voice carried the frustration of a world that once felt certain, a world of simple truths and simpler hierarchies. But the world has changed, and those hierarchies are trembling. Kelley Robinson spoke of intersex individuals, of cultures that have long recognized genders beyond two. She spoke of a generation no longer afraid to name themselves. Yet her composure, her steadiness, seemed only to sharpen the resistance before her. Kennedy leaned in, invoking fairness, invoking rights, invoking what he called credibility. He said, "You hurt your credibility when you refuse to acknowledge that biological males have an advantage over biological females." But what he was really saying, and what millions heard between the lines, was something older. That recognition of one truth must come at the expense of another. That equality must be earned through conformity. That some people's existence, no matter how respectfully spoken, remains up for debate. And then, as the exchange drew on, something more profound emerged. Senator Kennedy spoke of bedrooms and privacy, of parents' rights and fairness in sports. His words, wrapped in civility, carried a warning that freedom could be conditional, that compassion could have boundaries. Kelley Robinson did not flinch. Her final words were not of theory, but of humanity. "Trans women are women," she said. "My womanhood is not threatened by another asserting hers." It was quiet, but it was revolutionary. A reminder that justice is not about erasing difference, but about embracing it. What happened in that room was more than a clash of ideas. It was a mirror held up to America itself. One side seeking the safety of certainty, the other daring to live in the complexity of truth. One asking for limits, the other calling for freedom. And in that confrontation, we witnessed the American experiment in its rawest form, democracy struggling not just to legislate, but to understand. Because this hearing was never just about gender, it was about the soul of the nation, about whether empathy can survive in a system built to debate existence itself. When history looks back on this exchange, it may not remember the exact words or the sharpness of the questions, but it will remember the posture of the moment, a woman of courage standing before the machinery of power and choosing to speak truth anyway. For every person watching who has been told their identity is too complicated, too confusing, too inconvenient, this moment mattered. Because democracy is not only tested by what laws we pass, but by whose humanity we are willing to hear. Senator Kennedy's questions may have ended, but the echo of that hearing continues, in classrooms, in legislatures, in families trying to reconcile tradition with love. It continues in the quiet bravery of those who live their truth in a world still learning how to see them. This is the crossroads where America now stands, between the comfort of old certainties and the courage of new understanding, between the safety of the familiar and the promise of inclusion, between the fear of change and the freedom that comes when we finally accept it. The hearing is over. The microphones are off. The senators rise, their chairs scraping against marble floors that have heard centuries of arguments just like this one. But outside these walls, the real conversation continues, in hearts, in homes, in movements refusing to fade. And as the cameras fade to black, one truth remains. Equality is not a question to be answered. It is a promise to be kept. Beat of silence. This has been liberal freedom, because democracy depends on truth, and truth depends on the courage to see each other fully. Subscribe, share, and stand with us as we keep shining light on the moments that shape our future. Together, we fight not just for rights, but for understanding, not just for tolerance, but for freedom, for every voice unheard, for every truth unspoken. This is liberal freedom.